What's a subtle sign that someone has been through a lot of in life? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. There's nothing you can say that will surprise them. They know how fucked up the world is. They know what people can do, even the good ones. Story 2. They usually fall into one of these three. Hyper-reactive and defensive. Always on edge because life's taught them to expect the worst. Unprocessed trauma. Withdrawn and distant, they've shut out the world as a form of protection, denial, isolation, checked out from people or life. Chill to the point of detachment, they've stopped caring about most things because caring too much used to hurt. But at the end of the day, if you really think about it, these are all just assumptions. We never truly know unless that person chooses to share their truth. Story 3. Kindness, patience, and being considerate. People who have been through hell and then found their way back hope others never know their kind of suffering. You know, misery loves company like that, but the opposite. Story 4. Something I didn't realize until recently. The ability to discuss traumatic events like discussing the weather. I remember having a conversation with a few coworkers, and one of them mentioned wanting to be rescued by the A-Team as a child. While the rest of us continued talking, the last coworker immediately, rightly, pointed out the strangeness in wanting to have the A-Team come rescue them. The response I and the second coworker had was simple. Well, yeah, it's the A-Team. Obviously, in hindsight, I realized that yes, the correct, i.e. normal response would have been to question why the first coworker would want to be rescued by a fictional team that was on TV and not continue on with the conversation as though they had mentioned it being sunny outside. It really did take me a long time to realize my response was the irregular one. Story 5 doesn't instigate conflict even when appropriate, but once the total amount of mistreatment crosses a threshold, either gets out of there or lets loose the totality of pent-up appropriate conflict all at once, which appears to be an overreaction to the abuser and everyone else who turned a blind eye to the mistreatment. Absolute hatred of jump scares, scary entertainment, etc. When you've known real fear, you can't find any fear to be fun. Preoccupation with personal safety. Someone who's been through some and isn't willing to tolerate any more of it may very well be armed to the legal limit, and if you exhibit the behavior X they were taught are the precursor is to violence, you could find yourself on the business end of that armament. Story 6. You experience enough untimely death, betrayal, unpleasant surprises, uncomfortable, dangerous situations that you wonder if you'll make it away from. And one day you'll see these things coming from a mile away. You can feel them and know them for what they are. You become good at avoiding unwanted attention or situations. You pass on what you've learned to hopefully spare others the same feelings and experiences you grew up with. You suppress your reactions to intense environmental stimuli. You take the lead in getting through uncertain situations and dark places. Dreams that would be nightmares to others don't stir you. You don't fear death. You seize opportunities to smile. You become the person you wish you had by your side when your story began. Story 7. No expectations, no disappointments attitude with life. Total lack of idealism, romanticism with relationships and people. Fear levels always low, physical impulsivity, anxiety levels always high, mental rumination. Low self-esteem, constant apologizing and people-pleasing. Low sensory tolerance. Dry humor. Story 8. Over-explaining and over-apologizing about minuscule things that a normal person wouldn't spend more than 10 seconds thinking about. I.e., hey, I know when you got home you probably noticed I had left the window open. It was because when I made lunch, it got a bit smoky, and then I had to leave for my appointment. But I didn't want the apartment to be smoky when you got back, so I left it open, but I'm sorry if the place is cold or drafty, or you're upset because maybe someone could have broken in. Story 9, old man left when I was 9. Came to Canada at 12. We wear on and literally spit on. I had to provide and work right away, no school. Older brother took his life, found him dead. He was born with hydrocephalus. Mom losing her mind. I enlisted, did and seen stuff overseas that still hunts me every single day. I'm 38 now, have no family whatsoever, own a small business. I don't talk to people except for work. I can't be bothered with anything. Don't trust anyone, especially myself. Wake up every morning with the thought, there is a 5-year-old somewhere right now getting raped and worse, shock after shock and no time to process, mind if off, simply disconnected and don't care. If I die tonight, don't care. Story 10. Watanadiawam. 10. Negative jokes about themselves at the start of a conversation. Wanting to take the potential wind out of someone's sails by beating them to the punch by putting any hurt in an area you choose. Secondhand embarrassment. Can't stand to watch others be humiliated, even on a TV show. Dislike practical jokes as they feel like personal attacks. Assuming that nothing nice comes free, so waiting for the other shoe to drop or the ass to return a favor, and being suspicious of people's motives for doing a nice thing. Story 11. I didn't understand this for a long time, but an ex and her sister had incredible calf muscles. Everyone mentioned this. Both of them wore shorts nonstop because they got so many compliments. It was because they literally had to tiptoe through their whole childhood to keep from getting beat. Story 12. When something happens around you and everyone else acts like all hell is breaking loose and you just look up, make sure it's not threatening to you personally and go okay and go back to what you were doing. Story 13. They don't give a warrant about anything. That's the biggest thing I've noticed from one of my good friends who served in the Middle East for years. I've never asked him any details, but I know he's killed, and he's had friends killed right in front of him numerous times. He literally has zero fucks left to give. I've had to pull him out of bars several times because he would get into a full-on brawl if I didn't intervene. He just does not care. I remember one time some guy started getting mouthy at me because I turned down the shots he was buying. Ended up, he swiped my glasses off my face like a middle schooler, and my buddy was 2 seconds away from ripping his head off. Thankfully, they got the memo and gave me my glasses back, or I feel like an ambulance was going to be called that night. Story 14. They instantly read a room. It goes beyond knowing where the exits are or who is present. It is getting an instant, almost sixth sense of the emotion of the people in the room or space. I grew up with a bipolar parent and knew almost before I walked up onto my porch what the mood would be in the house and was already making plans before the door shut behind me. We know body language. In fact, it is one of our first languages. Story 15. They're really good at giving gifts and are made exceptionally uncomfortable receiving them. Kindness was often weaponized against them as a form of leverage, and so receiving gifts comes with the expectation of unforeseen consequences. On Twinner's Story 16, shrugging off near-death experiences, things that could have severely injured them. I have a buddy who walked off after a car accident bummed that he'd lost a car. Totally didn't care that he'd flipped it 4 times, and a post went through the windshield about 6 inches from his face. He was just really bummed out. Story 17. They tend to notice small details others miss, like who isn't speaking, who's uncomfortable, or who's faking a smile. Survival taught them to read the room, and trauma taught them to read between the lines. Story 18. The 3 strikes. Actually, it's not 3. It could be 3, 5, or 10, but it isn't. It's 3. You mess up, they brush it off, it's fine. They seem totally okay with you doing that. Then you do it again. They act the same. You do it again. They go straight to what seems like an overreaction. They may ghost you, leave you, cut you out of their life. No one keeps the count. They don't have time or patience for repeat offenders. Story 19. Often kindness and empathy. I have noticed this particularly in colleagues and managers at work. When someone had faced genuine struggles, they are much more understanding and empathetic. They recognize what you really need, and also that with support, hard times will be overcome. Story 20. Leathery skin, smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol, impoverished is one personality type for that. Not so subtle, I suppose. Another subtle sign is not complaining about small things, like a wrong order at a restaurant, if the food is still good. I knew a Syrian refugee who was nearly murdered trying to leave the country. He doesn't worry or complain about first world problems. Story 21. They tend to be more understanding and less judgmental. They're extremely independent. They rarely, if ever, talk about their past upbringing. And when they do, it's either really basic, universal, impersonal stuff, or it's something really dark and abnormal and catches me off guard. May not be appropriate for the audience on charm conversation. I've gone through this one with coworkers the most. Like, damn man, why you telling me this while we at work? Calm in a crisis, sure, high-stress environment or situation. However, when a trivial thing goes wrong, they melt down. Story 22. They don't open up. They are very timid and find it hard to give eye contact. They usually don't lift their head when talking, but you can hear them clearly. Don't dare mumble, as they are scared and never ask questions or ask for anything. Story 23. I have a friend who has been through some crazy trauma in life and nothing bothers her. She tells the funniest stories of devastating life events that would destroy me for weeks. Honestly, she could write a book, and smiles and laughs while I shake my head in shock. I'm sure there's a level of desensitization, but I also find it really inspiring that she just gets on with things. She's an absolute legend who works hard and has her own business. Story 24. They are never stressed. There is a guy at work and he is so Hakuna Matata, like nothing bothers him ever. But he talks about his life and you're just like, whoa, that's a lot. I think he just really sees the big picture. Story 25. They are usually very tired. It could be because they don't sleep well due to nightmares or racing thoughts, or it's because it just takes extra effort to function normally when you have to carry around a ton of trauma. They probably have mental health issues they struggle with. They have probably been in a lot of therapy to build mental tools to function, process the trauma, and stay sane. But they'll hide all of that. All you'll see is the exhaustion. Story 26. I think the people I know who have been through the most are also the most kind and empathetic people I know. If I meet someone who is abundantly kind, I know it's probably from a traumatic background. Story 27. Lack of sympathy. Oftentimes, it's just a person that's been wronged by humans so many times they're genuinely unable to feel sympathy for humans anymore. Lack of empathy. When you've been through something extremely messed up, it genuinely becomes difficult to understand someone else's suffering over something that seems minor in comparison to what you've been through. There are also cases of the opposite, high amounts of empathy or sympathy because you've been through so much and wouldn't want anyone else to suffer even remotely as much as you did. Story 28. How they act with food. I noticed when my husband and I were dating and first moved in together, he would scarf down food like that was it for a while, or he had to enjoy it while it lasted. Learned later down the line that he had experienced going days without food on and off throughout his childhood. And when they got food, they would eat it quickly because they were never sure when they'd have food again. Story 29. They don't overreact to drama, just kind of sigh, maybe crack a joke, and keep it moving. They've learned to stay calm because life's already thrown worse at them. You'll notice they're quick to help others but rarely ask for help themselves. It's not that they're cold, they're just tired and used to carrying things alone. Story 30. Survivors usually possess a keen sense for shifts in human emotions and can literally feel the anger or sadness of strangers behind them on a bus, even through walls sometimes. Survivors are often self-made and independent. Story 31. So many good indicators here. I notice my spouse has trouble forming friendships as he gets older. In his youth, many close friends of his passed away or went down an unfortunate path. Drug addiction, OD'd, imprisoned, etc. He doesn't bother forming bonds with new people anymore and is more of a loner. He's pretty stoic. He's not particularly close with his family, and he doesn't talk about his past often. He has been through so much, and I'm amazed and grateful he has been able to overcome so much adversity. Story 32. We laugh at a lot of seemingly sad, not because it's funny, but because we're recollecting our own experiences, and it's more of a, haha, yay, dog, been there, bud, or you sweet summer sausage, if you only knew, or a buckle up buttercup. We're not trying to diminish anyone either. It's more like, this is gonna suck, but I'm still here after all of it, and you will be too. Take comfort in that. Story 33. A subtle but specific sign is when someone over-apologizes for things that don't need an apology, like saying sorry for asking a question, taking up space, or even just existing in a room. It often reflects a deep-rooted fear of being a burden, which can come from past emotional trauma, neglect, or constantly having to walk on eggshells around others. Story 34. The light has left their eyes, being able to disassociate with that far-off stare. Non-reactive when crazy or good stuff happens. Almost like we can predict all the possible outcomes and aren't surprised by any of them. But at the same time, don't make assumptions about PPL based on superficial qualities, BC. We've seen it all from PPL. They mind their own business and don't share their business. Picky about their circle. They aren't superficial or needy. They don't think the world owes them anything. Not entitled. Enjoy and appreciate the small things. Don't feel like they have to keep up with the Jones. Story 35. They are emotionally aware about everyone near them, and they tend to speak mutually. When I say mutually, I mean they don't want to have a biased opinion because they are afraid to offend someone. Again, Story 36. We can react in a crisis and are generally calmer and more empathetic. Most people can't conceptualize the world outside their own experiences. However, those of us that have seen some things are not afraid of other people's pain. We can stand in the gap for others. Story 37. Empathy, silence, observation, wisdom, sincerity, no matter the emotion, or animosity, addiction, anger, depression, exhaustion, chronic illness, chronic everything. A mixture of it all. The beauty of humans is that we are each quite different and unique, and yet totally the same as well. It is more about a million little things that we take and choose, or reject, or do, or ignore, mixed with our environments and cultures and everything else. So these aren't really logical questions with any real answers, Emma. Story 38. They tend not to share things about themselves willingly. Not always. Some people are just like that, but sometimes they just know that opening up is an opportunity for someone to exploit as a weakness, so they don't do it. Story 39. Finding one person in the room that they can relate to easily and prioritizing that person in an emergency situation. Hey, sit over here today. For no apparent reason, because they have a bad feeling and want a quick exit. They can judge character very quickly, but keep it quiet until asked. They are very honest to a fault when asked for an opinion. No sugarcoating. They have way outside the box thinking when asked for potential solutions to problems. Within corporations, they are extremely good at sizing up all potential affected stakeholders when changes are proposed, because they are used to being on the lookout for angry, pitchfork, and torch types. They're excellent at breaking off relationships and never looking back. They are extremely good at both saying no and accepting no as an answer. They arm themselves for fights with words and weapons, and, when prompted, are unafraid to use either. They do not seek medical help until pain is unbearable or they are otherwise incapacitated, even when they have insurance, not because of work ethic, but because of an inability to access health care as children, young adults. Consequently, they have a plethora of home remedies to use in addition to doctor-prescribed remedies to common ailments. Breathing in Vicks VapoRub in hot water with a towel covering your head and the bowl, and your eyes shut for colds and sinus problems, gargling hot salt water for sore throats and cancer sores, rubbing vodka or moonshine on a tooth abscess to get it to burst, putting a hot tea bag on a sty or boil to bring it to a head, etc. They know how to find food, make things they need, and how little they can get away with. Story 40. Empathetic and hypersensitive. Taking on the energy of those around them because that's how they had to manage the narcissist adults around them. They had to predict the next move before it happened so they could protect themselves and others close to them. Story 41. Tear up and look down if someone compliments them. Hate their own birthdays and Christmas and celebrate neither. Just get through them. Withdraw and spend a lot of time alone when things get tough. Are uncomfortable being at other people's family gatherings, as family never meant anything happy or good. Will change the subject deftly or give a generic and vague nondescript answer if ever asked about their childhood. Are the first to notice a shift in the mood of a room and will have an antenna for any aggression or sudden conflict. Have an ability to walk through a room or sit in a corner and remain invisible, like an invisibility cloak. Won't have family photos or cards on their wall, in their phone, or anywhere. Will often obsessively listen to the same songs on repeat. These songs were likely the only outlet for feelings and a soundtrack to their life. Will be empathic or intuitive to an incredibly high level. Gallows humor or very dark humor if you make it into the circle of close friends, which will be small. Almost impossible to shock or startle with traumatic events, and you will likely never hear them say, "Who could imagine someone doing something like that?" or other such things. When reading about abuse or terrible ways people are treated, they don't need to imagine, they have lived it. If someone says they are having a crisis, they are the first ones to help and will, to be honest, whether they admit it or not. Initially, Naturalku assume a crisis is a matter of life and death or devastating life-changing events. If you watch close enough, they may glance away and the smile slip for a moment while everyone else is chattering away about whatever is, for them, the source of their trauma. They're very unlikely to suddenly walk up behind anyone ever to surprise them or reach out and touch someone they are talking with. If they ever get visibly upset, they will apologize. Story 42. They can diffuse fights, physical and verbal ones, so easily. They know how to calm others down and negotiate options and compromise for the sake of others' peace, knowing what it's like to be on the receiving end of conflict. Story 43. They just don't give a want with everything around them. Like they will not mess with you, even if you mess with them, because they are tired and immune to all the shits that happens in life. Ha 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 ha. Story 44. They don't jump at unexpected loud noises like doors slamming, cars backfiring, etc. I personally go completely still and evaluate my surroundings for threats. I don't move, because that might add a variable to the situation I'm trying to decipher. Story 45. They smile, laugh, and live their life the best they can, despite life roughing them up. You wouldn't know something is going on unless you ask or they explicitly tell you. Also, they do everything on their own. They never ask for help and don't fully realize that people are there to lend a hand if they need it. Also, in my case, everyone at work is bashing on this company, and I get it because they have genuine reasons to, but I never thought I would get this far and actually do something with my life, so I'm just happy to be there. Story 46. These people as your partner will not support you when you go through terrible things because they had to do it all alone themselves and they think it's normal for people to self-soothe in crises. Or they have absolutely no idea how to help you because they were never shown help when it truly mattered. Don't ask me how I know. Story 47. Tremendous empathy for literally everything and everyone. In my experience, they don't like to see anybody hurt or suffering or afraid, in particular children and animals. And they tend to always think a bit more about others and how something, anything, really, may impact them. Story 48. They can be resilient. They may have a moment where they feel weak, overwhelmed, and even break down and cry, but can quickly recover from it because they've always had to be strong for themselves, because no one else was strong for them growing up, especially if you've experienced this from childhood and had only yourself and no real parental or adult figure to help you with your emotions. So as a child, you had to create your own coping mechanisms. People who don't know your full life story oftentimes will think that your resilience is a sign of how strong you are as a person, unaware that this trait is born of necessity to live in a world that you seem to be navigating mostly alone. Story 49. Paramedic here. Wouldn't say I've been through a lot of, but I definitely work with a lot of people who have seen and done some really fucked up stuff. There is no way to tell if someone has been through a lot just by looking or having a normal convo with them. People carry it differently. Some of the most outgoing and happy people I work with have been on some of the most fucked up calls I've ever heard of, and you'd never know it. Some of the most awkward and quiet people are total white clouds. While bad experiences do contribute to personality, it's not the whole ticket. Don't make assumptions. Story 50. People who are good, sometimes very good at what they do, but they have a visceral reaction to being complimented. I'm not talking about people who fake humility in order to get more compliments. That's easy enough to identify BC, even though they don't want a compliment. They'll linger on the subject hoping for more praise. I mean, those who will actively try to change the subject or minimize their part in the success, as if even the possibility that they could get complimented again would be painful. Usually this reaction is accompanied by hypervigilance. Subconsciously, they think that the only reason why they would receive compliments is BC, they're about to be attacked, or taken advantage of. These are damaged people, surviving, maybe even outwardly thriving, but always convinced that everything good in their life can be snatched away. It goes hand in hand with chronic pretender syndrome. Story 51. They are able to sleep through anything. I lived in a house with constant yelling and fighting and chaos. I have literally slept through the transformer exploding in my front yard, the power going out, and the transformer getting repaired. I walk outside in the mornings, not realizing it rained, and somebody will mention how we got literal thunderstorms all night. Story 52. I can no longer stand being around high-energy worrywarts. Like, unless somebody is actively dying, there's nothing to freak out about. And once there is a problem, there's a solution. I spent my 20s repeatedly almost dying, starving, becoming homeless. Having to change a plan momentarily is not a thing to get bug-eyed over. Story 53. This is noticeable to others to varying degrees, but I seem to have a hard time accepting that people I'm not close to like me, or that they might miss my presence. I don't feel I do much, but I've been told I have a calming effect on others. Story 54. Someone who never flinches. I know this sounds weird, but someone who doesn't jump or even remotely react to extremely loud noises. Someone who just stands there when someone jumps at them. They have a fight mentality, never flight. These people have some screws loose, and they have seen some stuff that made them this way. Story 55. The lack of visible emotions. They don't freak out or get overwhelmed. They stay calm and quiet while they visually and mentally evaluate everything. Absolutely everything. Possible outcomes in varying scenarios based on the reactions of other individuals. When time comes to make a decision, they are decisive and unwavering. They give the feeling of genuine indifference in the situations where others become overwhelmed or intimidated. Story 56. Keeping emotional distance. Lack of strong emotional attachments to other humans. Need to maintain that emotional distance in case of unacceptable behavior and need to jettison the relationship, sabotaging the moment if it starts feeling too emotionally close. Story 57. Knowing how to read people quickly and right away based on the way they speak, body language, etc. I need to figure people out as quickly as possible to be sure I know how to appease, avoid, or handle them. I'm rarely wrong. Story 58. They make self-deprecating comments or jokes with lots of dark humor, but it's stuff that's hard to tell if they're really joking or serious and just decided to play it off as a joke when they see people not sure if they should laugh. Story 59. I'm answering in reverse, but I moved to an area where people are very privileged, and the biggest, most unexpected difference I've noticed between them and the poor and marginalized people I have always been around is that they massively sweat the small stuff. They get upset about things I've never even noticed. Things I didn't even think were things will ruin their whole week, and they'll go to great lengths to try to fix them, even if it's something completely out of their control, and spend massive amounts of energy complaining. A lot of these people have probably never had to deal with real hardship and as a result aren't all that resilient, I suppose. Story 60. Toxic relationships. Emotional unavailability. Extreme or unusual sexual behaviors or preferences, such as not being able to make love or connect intimately. Aversion to physical touching. Interest in extreme BDSM. Viewing as either a coping mechanism or a competitive sport, being either very sexually available or unavailable, etc., etc. Self-sabotaging tendencies, drug abuse and other addictions, confusion surrounding self-identity, the list goes on. I suppose these signs aren't subtle, though. Story 62. One thing I didn't see is getting easily attached to people. As I've gotten older, I'm better at accepting it and seeing it for what it is if someone doesn't stay in my life, or if friends don't reach out as much as I like, but I used to take it very personally. I very often think of everyone I've ever known. As one of my multiple traumas, I don't have my family in my life, so I easily attach to people because I crave connection and closeness. It takes a lot of reflection and discernment to not let myself attach to people too closely, but I also know how to be vulnerable if someone shows healthy signs that they're safe to be attached to in a healthy way. Us people of trauma just want to love and be loved. Even if some people of trauma are avoidant. Story 63. Latching on to one person romantically and letting it consume them because they never had anyone in their past who showed them any trickle of love. So they feel like their entire world falls apart when they get dumped. They know it's unhealthy, but their brain and their heart are incredibly messed up based on their upbringing. Story 63. Highly distrustful of others, says sorry for everything. Despite not actually being sorry, BC, it's not a things to be sorry about anyways. Easily angered or very hard to anger. A friend of mine is the easily angered, but I've been seen as not emotional enough, BC. I don't show anger, and it takes a lot to anger me. Dark sense of humor, not to be considered with just being racist or similar fake dark jokes. Story 64. When we're so tired that we just keep quiet most of the time and don't get involved in any sort of drama, and when drama tries to find us, we literally barely react or do anything because of how exhausted of life we are, and because we've been through it all already, so nothing matters anymore. Story 65. Memory loss, like when they were already talked about a specific event before, but then come back a few days later describing that same event. I know some people just simply forget what they have said and to whom, but this is a common pattern I've noticed in people who went through a lot in the past. Story 66. Oh, you mean that subtle vibe where someone's got the 1,000-yard stare of a war vet, stays cool while the world's on fire, and listens like they've heard every sob story in the book? Yeah, totally just born with that. Not like life's been their personal punching bag or anything. Story 67. I've seen so many aloof, distant, stoic ones, like y'all realize that can describe autism too, right? Truth is, the signs can vary massively, especially depending on how far away they are from those events. The signs that someone has been through a lot of is they tell you they've been through a lot of. Story 68. They have an uncontrolled but very subtle smirk or laugh in response to dark humor. When they complain, it's a complete deconstruction of a problem in a nuanced but humorous way that's difficult to argue. Immaturity makes them sigh, or they kind of just watch it the same way a pet owner uncaringly monitors when their pets fight with each other. They can smile with tear eyes and mouth separately in a threatening way while still being civil. Story 69. Hot take, some of you had abusive parents, but other than that, almost none of you have been through a lot of, so almost all of the responses are hyper-specific to abusive parents. Why would someone who's been in and out of prison or been through war or lived on the streets close doors softly? Story 70. Look into their eyes. Their eyes won't lie regarding their struggle. Click a pic and crop the eyes out without the lips and other parts of face. If you see sad eyes, that would be their struggle. Also, they eschew from being asked personal stuff. Story 71. They relate to almost everything listed here. But also as a side note, it really depends on if the person has gone to therapy or done the work to heal and learn to love themselves. I have a partner who has been through lots of trauma and can lack empathy, where for me, I'm the opposite and can be overly empathetic. Story 72. They have no friends, no social life. They may hardly leave the house. That's me. I'm so tired of being seen as a freak for going through so much and admitting to being stressed about it sometimes. It is too hard to be guarded around people all of the time, so I just stopped trying. Story 73. In my family, making noise was a deadly sin. Now I'm very, very stealthy. I can't control it, so I constantly jump scare other people by being there without any notice. Like some ghost teleporting behind you. I honestly think I need some kind of bell to prevent this. It can happen several times a day. Story 74. My great-grandmother lived through the Great Depression and had a young child at the time. All her life afterwards, it was like pulling teeth to get her to throw anything away. I don't mean garbage. She didn't have that problem, but things like old shoes, worn-out clothes, etc. She explained that during the Depression, you kept things as long as you could because there was no telling when you'd have an opportunity to replace them. Even if you had money to buy new shoes, the shoe store in your town might have gone out of business and there were no shoes to be had. She wasn't a hoarder. I don't want to give that impression. But anything that could be reused or might last another week or so, it was impossible to get her to get rid of. Story 75. Dude, I was diagnosed with cancer and felt bad for like a day or two. My response to nurses and such who are surprised by my reaction of, oh, I'm going to joke about this constantly. I've been taking bad hits my whole life. This is just one more. Why worry? You do what you can, and anything else is just wasted energy. For years, there's no way my body's going to kill me when I like being alive now. So yeah, the ability to roll with almost any punch is an often subtle sign. You have to be around for a disaster to really notice it. Story 76. When you think about them, you realize that everything you know about them starts from the timeline where you first met them, combined with a strong but wounded character. They're not letting you into their past. Story 77. They're kind of people who treat them like dirt. They're apologetic for everything, even breathing too loudly. They keep trying to help, even if you didn't ask for it, because they were taught at some point that it's their job to take on other people's burdens. Story 78. Alert. Watching exits and scanning a room. Extreme self-sufficiency. We hear about those who cringe at raised voices, burst into tears, and who are needy. We ignore those who are hyper-alert, take care of themselves to a fault, and don't bat an eye when a fight breaks out. It could go either way. We process traumas differently, and some folks fall apart while others will work themselves to the bone to avoid needing another human being's touch or input. Story 79. The people I've known who struggled the hardest in life are easy to please and find great joy in the small things in life. The people I've known who had life on easy difficulty tend to get bored quickly and have no patience for other people. I've met a middle-aged man who lost everything and lived on the streets as a homeless person for several years and was finally able to put his life together. One of the happiest people I've met. Story 80. Depends on the person. For example, I drift off a lot. I look like I'm thinking, and I am LOL, but it's very different. It's like emotionless facial expression mixed with dead glassy eyes. Sometimes I talk too much and too fast. Anxiety due to not being able to talk growing up or being beaten for speaking. I breathe heavily when I'm ready to pop off on someone, but I need to practice my coping mechanisms. My therapist told me, just breathe however you know before you snap. So I do, and I will sound like I'm inhaling the world when I'm irritated from flashbacks and triggers. Story 81. That's a loaded question. Everyone is different. Sometimes vastly different. For any one answer you get, someone out there will be the opposite because people are like diamonds. Everyone responds differently. Best thing to do is whomever you're asking about, even if it's yourself, ask that person, what are things you do to protect yourself when you feel like you are in a situation that makes you feel uncomfortable? Or when you feel uneasy, what do you do? Story 82. All of the comments are spot on. I'll add the ability to completely cut someone out of their life and move on like nothing happened. They'll put up with some mistreatment from friends or lovers, but that one time too many, you're ghosted by them on a snap. It's like the drama that conflict brings isn't worth it, so they go no contact. Story 83. I just had a friendship end because of this. I know she'd been through more than most people, and this is how it all manifested. So this is a very specific list of things that might not apply to others. Difficulty acknowledging their mistakes or being wrong. Assigning blame to other people. Unreasonably heightened sense of pride to the point of being self-damaging. Importance and ability. Excessive use of alcohol or wine, or engaging in self-destructive behaviors. Hair-triggered temper that easily flares out of control. Pushing people away. Obviously, there are a lot of other things that might indicate a person's experienced a lot of trauma, but these are the things I noticed in my friend. I tried to support her as long as possible, but it ended mutually because of her inability to swallow her pride. I should point out that I made my own mistakes, always by accident, never intentionally, in the friendship, which at times precipitated her own behavioral problems. Despite all the problems, I had so much fun with her when she was in a good mood. The good outweighed the bad. I'll miss her a lot. Story 84. I've read a lot of great comments here, but surprisingly, none about an affinity with animals. I think a lot of people who have been through a lot in life have a tendency towards pets and often seem to be instinctively good with animals in general. Story 85. Because the majority of my life has been slammed with one tragedy after another, and combined with being abused as a child, I'm now stuck in fight or flight mode, constantly on the defense, convinced something will implode at any moment. I super enjoy the running stream of negative thoughts in my brain. Sometimes I genuinely wish I didn't existing at all. I'm so tired of being broken and weird. Story 86. They are usually unfazed by unexpected crisis, but would flip out when a minor inconvenience occurs. Sure, nothing they can do about a big crisis, but let it pass and move on. Though if even the little things in life starts falling apart around them, it does seem to be frustrating enough and destroy that thin ice to breaking point. Story 87. A subtle sign that someone has been through a lot in life is how calm they seem in situations where most people would react intensely. It's like nothing can surprise them anymore because they've already survived the worst. That calmness often isn't a sign that everything is easy. It means they've learned to save their energy, to stay quiet when they could shout, and to carefully choose what's worth fighting for. But that really depends on the person. You can have an extroverted person who has been through a lot of hardship. In the end, everyone is different and everyone writes from their own experience, something that's personal to them. For example, I connect more easily with people who share my pain. I don't know why, but I do. Again, it all depends on the person. Someone can show all the signs of wisdom without having gone through major struggles. Maybe they just learn from the mistakes of others. People are different. Everyone reacts differently, sees things differently, and feels things differently. Story 88. They don't take things for granted. They appreciate things that people with easier lives take for granted. And the flip side, there's stuff other people enjoy that they see differently because of what they've been through. Like they wouldn't want to go camping because it reminds them of being homeless. Stuff like that. Story 89. They can often suss everyone and everything out, pick up on energies like it's their full-time job, but lack the ability to call people out on it or create boundaries for themselves. They're either completely self-isolating or being taken advantage of, rarely an in-between. Story 90. They have survivor instincts. They know where the exits are. They know where everyone is around them. They try to fit in every situation, even if they hate it. They are good negotiators. They will try to keep their issues off of everyone's radar. They have a very private side. Story 91. I find that the more gentle a person is and the less likely they are to blow up on someone shows that they have been through a lot and more than likely had to get help for it. Being gentle and kind is different than being nice. Don't confuse the two. When a person was around trauma, their whole life it's often a common thing to be nice and keep the peace in order to avoid danger. I know many people may not agree with these statements, but it is something I have noticed. Story 92. Lost. They say that hell is crowded. Yet when you're in hell, you always seem to be alone. And you can't tell anyone when you're in hell or they'll think you're crazy, and being crazy is being in hell, and being sane is hellish too. Those who escape hell, however, never talk about it, and nothing much bothers them after that. I mean, things like missing a meal, going to jail, wrecking your car, or even the idea of death itself. When you ask them, how are things, well, they'll always answer, fine, just fine. Once you've been to hell and back, that's enough. It's the greatest satisfaction known to man. Once you've been to hell and back, you don't look behind you when the floor creaks and the sun is always up at midnight, and things like the eyes of mice or an abandoned tire in a vacant lot can make you smile once you've been to hell and back. Charles Bukowski, Story 93. Always the one to step up for others but cannot trust anyone else to be there, regardless of how many times they actually show up for them in a crisis. Also incapable of letting on that they're dealing with a crisis, much less actually asking for help until painted into a corner, and more apt to wait for the paint to dry rather than to acknowledge the need for assistance. They really don't expect anything helpful to follow when others understand their situation, and they are always looking for the catch when someone offers or attempts to help. Glaring gaps in knowledge of pop culture because they were too busy surviving to notice crap like that while it was happening. Also hates being noticed because attention is rarely expected to lead to good things. Now you'll just have to excuse me while I crawl back under my rock. I feel a little too exposed in Iran. Story 94. They can talk about sad or scary things like it's nothing and have no idea how feeling their feelings works concerning those things. As someone who has medical PTSD, it took me a really long time to feel anything outside of meh about those experiences because they were normal to me. Story 95. They look much older than their actual age, or they listen more than they talk, choosing their words wisely. It's hard because there's the been through a lot life experiences where things happen to us based on our poor choices, and then there's the life experiences that are outside our locus of control. Drug abuse versus losing a child. I don't know, but I see these as different life experiences, been through a lot. One requires forgiveness of ourselves, and one requires not being a victim to life. I'm probably overthinking. Story 96. Like all things, there's no set qualities that show people have experienced things, but one thing I haven't seen is someone mention tension. Your body holds on to trauma just as much as the brain does. Shortly after my dad died from cancer, and having been his primary caregiver next to my mom, and we both had to watch him go from a very healthy mid-50s man to this husk that was just struggling to stand anymore, and holding on by willpower alone, until oncologists informed him any chemo attempts would kill him outright because he was that weak. He passed the very next week, and having to sit there and make a DNR decision, it felt like we were killing him, but we knew he was dying anyways, and trying to revive him would just be painful and cruel. That haunts me still. We ended up booking appointments for a full-body massage maybe 3-4 months post-death. Hiradike how to describe the state we were in, other than we were normal, but lacking energy nor life. I lost my dad far before he should have gone, and my mom lost her partner of 30+ years. Lady Doing Mine is very, very kind and warned me that sometimes people have emotional releases during stuff like this, as the muscles are physically relaxed. I didn't sob, but there were definitely some tears, but it wasn't until afterwards that I realized how wound up I'd been, tense like a garage door spring. Still took over a year for an actual breakdown to happen, LOL. Now, I make dead dad jokes, as is my God-given right, and live life knowing life sucks, the world sucks, and I can die anytime, anywhere. So I'm just taking my pleasures where they come. If I make it to 50, I'll be just as surprised as I was when I made it to 18 now. Cancer. Story 97. I've had a lot happen in the last 10 years, and I used to be very outgoing and social. I have stage 4 cancer, and after my diagnosis, I felt like I became the hot gossip topic in town. Then after about a year, most people just ghosted me. I have completely withdrawn from social media. No posts, no reaching out to people anymore. I don't hear from them, and I stopped trying. The only people I see besides my doctor's office and their staff are my husband and my adopted by me son. He is my husband's son from his first marriage. I don't go out except for medical appointments. I think I may die of loneliness before cancer gets me because my 2 family members are mostly home to eat dinner and sleep. Story 98. My boyfriend says I have trauma voice. He couldn't quite describe it, but he says that I have some sort of tone or inflection of words whenever I speak, especially to strangers. It's like I'm trying to be as palatable as possible to avoid conflict. He said the only time it goes away is when I'm talking about something I know a lot or am passionate about. Story 99. Let's see. Food scarcity. After my parents' divorce, I lived in a car briefly with my mom and siblings, and then, while living with my dad, he locked up food. So now I have a tendency to overstock on food. CSA, I'm extremely overprotective over my children and their friends. For my kids, I have to know where they are all of the time, so I know that they're safe. Spousal death. I have happy moments during the worst days of my life. Davi, I automatically flinch at any quick movements. Story 10, somewhat related to the top comment. They don't sweat the small stuff. I had 2 coworkers at one point at a job. For one of them, every little thing was the end of the world. She had meltdowns left and right over the dumbest things, like difficulty printing a document. The other, the building could have been burning down, and as long as she got out, it wouldn't have fazed her. The one had an extremely spoiled upbringing and never wanted for anything in life. She liked to stir up drama, probably because she didn't actually have much to worry about. The other, one of her sons, was killed years prior by a drunk driver. Her husband was in the midst of dealing with cancer. She had been through the ringer, so a bad day at work was nothing to her. She joked that she came to work to relax. Story 11. Nothing seems to bother them. You could say the craziest to them, and there won't be a noticeable difference in the interaction. If you see someone like that, definitely don't aggressively try to push their buttons to get a rise because they will also react too much when personally challenged. If they don't even seem to react to that, they might plot on you. This does sound edgy, but some people are broken with unhinged behavior. Story 12. They don't have an embarrassment gene. Like if they think they're getting taken advantage of in the smallest way, they don't give a who has to hear about it or if anyone is inconvenienced. Don't even try to rationalize with them. Also, understandably, don't ever take something, even unintentionally, from someone who has done time in prison. Working construction my whole life, I've known a lot of ex-cons. Go ahead and short them half an hour on their check. There will be no making it right next week. The number of times I've heard, I'm not leaving this job site without what's owed to me, one way or another. LOL. Story 13. I don't know, man. Most of the comments describe me, yet I wouldn't say I've been through a lot of examples. Closing the door quietly. Yeah, when you live with other people, you're supposed to be as silent as possible. Situational awareness. Well, duh, you should always be aware what's happening around you. Not everyone on this planet is a nice guy. Kind and generous, isn't that the default setting, peeps? Don't like fake drama. Like literally nobody I know likes fake drama. Story 14. I work in a school, and a lot of kids' behavior is learned. If they're overly sexual, they've been molested or abused. If they're physically violent, then they've been physically assaulted. If they're blunt or sound malicious, they've been verbally abused. Story 15. Finding it hard to be there for people shucks friends in the more mundane struggles of life, like struggling to keep in contact or to listen, care about lesser worries of theirs. But if there is an emergency, I am immediately there and helping. It's like emergencies I can understand and do. Like here I thrive and am at home, but anything else is an effort to be there for. Story 16. Literally a guy broke into my apartment. I tossed him out. Well, helpfully I had my dogs with me. Almost lost a life once falling off of a cliff. In the 5 seconds, managed to execute the plan of where to fall and how to land so I'd be least injured, but my printer ink is clogged. I'm having a meltdown. My partner switched forks and spoons, placements without telling me. Small panic attack. So weird. Story 17. Struggling to make eye contact or express themselves verbally. From my own experience, expressing myself verbally was usually shot down. being told to shut up and listen, but then called mousy or scary if I didn't speak up. But if I did speak up, then it was considered confrontational, and I would be squared up to by an adult. Now it's tough to look people in the eye, speak confidently, or show my true self. Only the quiet, reserved person I was raised as. Story 1-8 depends on the person and how long have you got. I would say they could be going at things too speedily, speaking too fast, jerky movements, sign of anxiety, or not turn up to appointments they need to, sign of depression, low mood. For CPTSD, people can appear very absent, disassociated, and ghost-like, as if they are haunting their own life. For the pathological or personality disorders, I look for early charm offensive followed by giving you a lot of praise, wanting intense intimacy, then getting bored quickly when they don't get what they want. Also look for early emotional drama, making smallish things into big things that are now somehow your problem as well as theirs, expecting rescuing, etc. I would say keep your distance over time, they will reveal themselves. For paranoid psychosis, I look for intent on believing in something very irrational. A lot of persecution could be God's punishment, conspiracies, etc. They can't let go of things that happened to them in their past and refer to it a lot. They never make any real progress, always a victim, but often victimizes and rants that become obviously false after knowing them a while. Narcissists deny, reflect, always talk about themselves, big themselves up, etc., make some compromises, but when the power dynamic changes and they have you where they want those compromises end pretty quickly, and then they gaslight, always put themselves first. There are so many ways to be fucked. These are just a few that come to mind. Story 1-9. When someone always brushes off their own struggles and says things like, it's fine, or others have it worse, even when they're clearly not okay. It's like they've learned to keep stuff inside and not ask for help because they were used to dealing with things on their own or felt like their pain didn't matter. You'll see it in how they smile when they're hurting or how quick they are to say sorry. Story 1 in shutting down or becoming quiet. It's easy to misinterpret something someone said and feel deep shame, fear, anxiety, and you've trained yourself that being quiet is the best way, and any other reaction, fight, flee, may make things worse. As an adult, somewhere, like a workplace, you also understand how being reactionary may work more against you versus acting more along the lines that it didn't bother you while you shut down and mentally beat yourself up and cry in private. You can also start to gaslight yourself as you try to convince yourself you are overreacting and that there's no way that what happened actually did happen. Sometimes the pain you feel internally doesn't necessarily match the experience, but sometimes you talk yourself down and it actually was that bad. You just convince yourself of certain things because nothing about the past you've been to is normal, so you don't have much experience of normal baseline to compare anything to. Story 111, the eyes show it. If the person still has a soul, relatively speaking, then the eyes show understanding, exhaustion, patience, acceptance, and kindness. If they killed their soul and they couldn't hold on to it in the process, then the eyes are just cold, no feeling behind them. Story 112. Maybe it's because I've spent my entire life at or below the poverty line and surrounded myself with people in the same socioeconomic situation, but they're breathing. No, seriously, I have never taken the time to get to know someone and not found out they've been through a lot of in life, or said without the double negative. Whenever I've taken the time to get to know someone, I always find out they've been through a lot of in life. I just like double negatives. My life has been a double negative, which is why I'm even typing this to begin with. Everything else is just how the trauma has been processed. Like, okay, let's take situational awareness, for example. If it's really high, they've processed their trauma as a need to stay hyper aware of their surroundings to stay safe. But if they're not hyper aware of their surroundings, they may have gone through some serious but processed it as a need to stay focused on their own bubble. It's not safe outside the bubble. It matters about the age in which the trauma happened and whether or not they had a means in which to protect themselves. The child who hid under the bed versus the soldier who was assigned to recon. The same is true for many of the top comments here. A quiet person who minimizes their existence and the loud person who needs to be seen. Both have been through some. We've got a lot of folks talking about empathy, as if apathy isn't a direct result of trauma as well. And then there's also the issue of healing. The empathetic person working on being less of a people pleaser. The closed-off individual trying to relearn how to make connections. So instead of looking at various traits to tell you about the amount of a person has endured, it may be wiser to allow that to tell you about how that person has learned to exist in a world where happens. At least that's what it looks like from my vantage. So that's my final answer. The most subtle sign that someone has been through a lot in life is that they are breathing. Story 113. I really don't speak at all about my past, but since there are curious people, today I will. Growing up, I was molested as a child and came from a severely broken home where my mom was beaten and chased with axes and chainsaws on a nightly basis. We moved to a new town and new school almost every year of my childhood. We also struggled WBU homelessness at times. I was in a really bad wreck on my sweet 16 where the car flipped 5 times going 120 mph and landed on my head, pinning me underneath and nearly killing me. I wasn't driving. By 17, I was an IV heroin user, and from 1920, I was in prison for a year for driving my drug dealer to shoot someone. After getting out of prison, was in 3 domestic violence relationships. I had a brutal, unprovoked rape at 23 and less brutal rapes in between, which led me back into IV fentanyl addiction for years, which led me to prostitution to support that addiction. I met the most amazing man and he got me sober. We were together 4 years and were engaged. Then he died suddenly from a heart attack at 27 in his sleep, from a condition he had since birth that we didn't even know he had. He was the best thing I ever had in my life. This was my most painful experience to date, not to even mention watching 2 of my best friends be shot and murdered in front of my eyes, and losing around 43 friends' family total from all types of death. Sadly and honestly, I could keep going on, but these are just the highlights in my mind. I'm a 32-year-old female. I've somehow managed in the last 4 years to start my own business where I am making $400K a year, flew to Turkey and got my teeth all fixed, bought my own home, staying clean, been traveling the world, and physically I don't look too rough from where. Not a wrinkle in sight. I'm Lebanese, to be fair. I've also posted on social media this entire time, since 14, acting like absolutely none of this was ever happening. The only way anyone could tell my past is either me telling you or you picking up on the subtle signs. Most of even my close friends don't know a fourth of what I've actually been through. Only my very best friend and my mom know everything. I am beyond blessed to have them. I feel I show it by having so much empathy and compassion for every human being around me. Solely because have likely been there too. In my head, I'm some wise old woman, but I'm still relatively young, which is also terrifying. I have a lot of emotional intelligence and natural street smarts and common sense by now. 2, a lot of humor. I don't play about people I love. It's also very hard to hurt my feelings. If I think of anything else, a lad, but these are my biggest clues I give, I think. Story 114, in my opinion. I was in a store the other day and a woman was in there trying to figure out a way to pack her cart so it wouldn't spill. When I walked up to pass her, she appeared to be struggling a little bit, so I asked if she needed any help, to which she said no, and I eventually passed her. When she came out a few minutes later, thanked me several times for offering to help and told me she was programmed to think of help as inconvenience. Story 115. I feel like when talking to people, they word their sentences well or carefully if they're trying to, like they are more aware of what someone will think about them if they say a certain thing. And of course, they can be somewhat quiet or awkward sometimes. And I've noticed that they crave a deeper physical connection, though they may not want to show it to people. It's like their mind and heart has hardened somewhat as a defense mechanism. For some people, this means they can be angry and uncaring, but for others, they retain their empathy underneath, despite appearing somewhat cold. Story 116. Workshopping this, but I'll share. There's 2 types of people when they make a blaring mistake or something bad, embarrassing happens. One type will say, I hate myself. The other will say, I hate my life. Notice this with gaming, but it can extend beyond it. I noticed I clicked with the I hate myselfs more. They tend to see their own flaws the most. They've been put through the ringer and became conditioned to blame themselves. When reminiscing on everything that happened, they may say, I hate my life, but that's when looking at everything all at once. What I'm talking is situational. The I hate my lives, in my experience, blame the world around them. They tend to be more self-serving and cocky. They haven't learned to blame themselves because they are, to themselves, blameless. I'm working with a small sample size and haven't talk of this, just observations I've been making. Story 117. Whenever people need it and I know about, I cook dinners or buy dinners for the family. Usually somebody in the neighborhood coordinates this and it works very well. I was in a bad car accident a while back, laid out for months and nobody did this for me. Finally, I said something to my neighbor, hint, hint. She's the type of person who is always cooking or baking for fellow church members. I am not a member of her church. She not only cooked for me, but resented every second of it and let me know it. I normally have a hard time asking for help. This just buried it for me. People suck. Story 118. Extreme boredom in classroom situations, both kids and adults. I sort of noticed this as a kid, but didn't put two and two together. Last year, though, I did an adult education Francisation course. We all needed to learn French because it's a French-speaking area. Halfway through the course, our amazing teacher was moved to a different class, and we got a new teacher in who infantilized the entire class. Some folks joined in with the kids' songs and silly antics, but a group of us sat there thinking, what in the fresh hell is this BS? Anyway, for me, that is the universal sign of, these are my people. So I start talking to them in broken French and English, when some of us knew English. And it turns out all of us have been through a lot of in life, and it was actually a good bonding experience. I'm still friends with a fair few of them. Story 119. When you are talking to them, they are fully in the convo, but are fully scanning the room with their eyes and subtly move you around during the convo, so they can continue to assess the room. My cousin who did time does this. When I talk to her about it and tell her if someone was rolling up on you, I got you. Her answer is, it's not that I don't trust you. I don't trust anyone.